Welcome to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm Dr. Kristin, an integrative holistic family physician, author of Life After Lyme, and host in this virtual space of learning, healing, and growing. I believe humans are like trees, and our physical limb is only one of many. Health on all limbs of the tree, emotional, conceptual, social, spiritual, is absolutely required for the whole tree that is you to be vibrantly well. I created the Healing Grove podcast as a place to showcase some of the world's best integrative and holistic medicine, to expose you to transformative tools and mindset shifts for all limbs of your tree. I hope you enjoy our conversation in the Healing Grove today as much as I enjoyed having it. Hey there, Deborah Weed. So good to see you. I want to introduce you to all these wonderful people listening. So everyone, this is my friend Deborah Weed. She's a creative whirlwind, a motivator, and a life force facilitator. She's the founder of Self-Worth Initiative, whose mission is to foster self-worth so that people will be true to themselves by being authentic, energized, and joyous. Sounds pretty good to me. Deborah's raison d'etre came out of a personal crisis. While getting an MRA, a medical technician went to give her a shot of gadolinium and missed the vein. By accident, that toxic heavy metal was shot directly into her arm. And since then, Deborah has devoted her life to re-energizing the vital spark of people who have hit their own roadblocks. And I would love for her to share some of that story with us as we prepare for her to deliver some really awesome content today. So Deborah, are you willing to tell us what happened and what you went through before we get into what your offering is now?
It's my honor. It's my absolute honor. Well, I have to start, Kristin, when I was a little girl, actually. When I was a little girl, I was kind of like a Shirley Temple, and I would always skip. My dad would say, I skipped instead of walked. And I was full of joy and happiness, but kids used to say I was too sweet, too nice. And so as I got into high school, I'm like, I'm going to show them, I'm going to be something amazing. So I go to school, right? And when I'm in college, I end up taking artwork because I'm a natural born artist. And the teacher gives me a D. I'm like, no D for me. I'm going to go into marketing and advertising business. That makes sense, right? This nice, sweet girl, because she wanted to show up and be important and be, seen, I decided to go for some amazing things. So I did. I ended up being the director of marketing for Fame International, and Fame International worked on a $26 million pavilion with Universal and Disney people for Kia Motors. I ended up being the director of development for Citibank. So my life was, I thought, golden. But here's what I need everybody to really hear. I never smiled. Never. I was in corporate. I dressed the part. I acted the part. And the more serious I took myself, the more sad inside I got.
Wait, hold on, time out. So I'm struck with this Shirley Temple lollipop situation flipping on its end. And that happened in high school. That was like a conscious choice that you made.
Oh, it was conscious because I wanted to, it was so important to me to fit in. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be part of a group. I wanted to, and I really thought, silly me, I thought when you get into corporate or business, that's where you make friends. That's how naive I was. We am. So I got into that, but here's the most interesting thing, Kristin, is I excelled. I hit it running, and I just people came to me for some of the most amazing creative ideas because it was a natural born talent. But here's where things get wonky. All of a sudden, I'm remarried with my husband, who I absolutely love, but something's going very, very wrong. And I go from being vibrant, dynamic, full of life, to pretty much being bedridden I go to doctor to doctor to doctor. And Kristin, I'm sure you can understand this piece. Each doctor told me something different. One doctor said I had possible Lou Gehrig's. Another doctor said I probably had MS that was coming on. Or he actually said, you do have MS. I went to another doctor who said it was all in my head. Now, I was at the age where you have, you know, possible perimenopause. So I knew that I had very, very heavy menstruation, very heavy. But you know, when I went to the doctor, they did an ultrasound on me. When they were doing the ultrasound, they found nothing. So that's why I kept on going to doctors and doctors. Now, here's what I want everybody to hear more than anything. It's so important. Doctors, I mean, and I love you, Kristin, because you really listened. I mean, after I read your story, but I need to go back to this one. What doctors are like gods, and what they say to our husbands and our families matter. So here I am, newly married with this husband who sees me as vibrant and dynamic, and all of a sudden I'm bedridden, and he's a lawyer. So we're going from doctor to doctor to doctor, and no two doctors give me the same diagnosis. So what do you do with that? Well, as it turns out, I was desperate. And when I was desperate, as you can imagine, I went to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor did one of these things. And when he did, he did the C2. I can't even say the word because it's so upsetting to me, but it's the thing that you know. Anyways, he did one of these. And my blood vessel was almost like getting a stroke all the time. So between not knowing what's going on, not being able to get my head up, being in bed for 3 years, I thought it was all over. Until a genius doctor found out that I had a tumor the size of a grapefruit behind my uterus. My iron had been a 3. And he said, I don't even know how you're alive for all this time. And once again, I need to just share with everybody, because this is so important to me. The pain, the agony, the frustration, the dismay was horrible, but the shame of not having my family understand what was happening to me made me feel worthless, absolutely worthless. So now I'm feeling worthless. I read about a penny that's worth $250,000. And I was like, wow, you know what? If a penny can be worth that much, then how much am I worth? And that started getting me thinking about self-worth. So I went on to do all these amazing musicals about self-worth. I changed my career when I got my health back. They did a hysterectomy, and I got my iron came back, and I got my life vital, and I started doing amazing things. Again, I was an award-winning artist, doing productions, thought I had everything in the world going for me. And my husband, David is his name, he ended up just like, when he realized that the doctors had missed that, he was like, oh my gosh, Deborah. And from that day on, he's believed me to the core. So I'm having this amazing life again, second time around. I'm so excited. And then David decides to retire, and we decide to take a trip around the country and go on trails. And I'm gonna be like a journeyer for the rest of my life. But remember, I have this neck injury where they said that if I turn my neck a certain way, I could die at any moment. They basically said it's a ticking time bomb. If you move your neck, you can die. But if you get the operation, because it's a C2, very, very high, where the loop is, and they try to put a stent in there, then that can kill you too. This is what my doctor told me. So, but I decided to jump anyways and go on this trip. So we're going on this trip. And listen, Kristin, my idea of a trail before that was going to Macy's and buying a dress. That was my trail. And now I'm on all these other trails and I'm doing great. But I was, I was really nervous about my neck. So I needed to get another MRA. I go to a doctor or the hospital to get an MRA to make sure that my neck is still okay, because we're doing all this climbing that I have never done before. And the technician puts the gadolinium, and gadolinium is like a heavy metal. It's almost like mainstreaming mercury. That's the best way that I could describe it. She puts it, instead of in my vein, she puts it in my arm. And all of a sudden, my arm—
On accident, right? To be clear, on accident. Like she was going for the vein, but missed the vein, went into your tissue.
That is correct. It was definitely not on purpose, but when that happened, they gave me a little note and they said, okay, here's your note. If anything happens or you feel a lot of pain, just let us know. But I didn't understand at that point. I had no clue what that meant. I was like, oh, the contrast, they call it a contrast. They don't call it gadolinium heavy metal. So I went home, and then the next terrible years happened, where I would have excruciating bone pain to the point where I could only sleep for about an hour. That was all that I could do every night. And David would stay up with me all night long, just trying to get me to sleep. Now, once again, my poor family is looking at me going, what is with this girl? Because I always get the undiagnosed things, the things that are the mystery stuff, the stuff where somebody can't say, oh, Deborah, I get you. Wow, you're so brave. You're so wonderful. Instead, people are looking at me like, really? Really? And yet this time around, David was like I almost called him Saint David. He was like trying his best to keep me alive. And we were going from one person to the next person to the next person. Okay. I have to emphasize that when I was in horrific pain, I also felt a little bit of a blessing that this time around, at least I had support. But I wanted to check out. I kept on thinking, I'm going to be in a wheelchair. I can't handle this constant pain. I'm getting no sleep. This is happening for so long. And I came back here, and this is where my big miracle happened. And my big miracle is that I was trying to decide, am I in, am I out with life? And David was taking me to an acupuncturist, and he was putting all the needles in me. And then he stopped. He goes, you know what, Deborah, I'm not going to be able to keep you alive. This isn't working. And I'm thinking, wait, this is an acupuncturist who could make money, sticking me with needles. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, tell me about who you are. Tell me about your life. And so I did. And he goes, oh my gosh, you are too creative. You have so much juice in you, and there's nowhere for it to go. Your spirit is dying. Your soul is dying. Your will is dying. And if we don't get you back in life, moving in the right direction, I don't know what's going to happen. So he prescribed for me to take improv classes. Now, I've always been a producer behind the scenes. I've never been like the person in front. And all of a sudden, like, I can hardly walk. And David's like, what are we doing? Improv? Are you kidding me? But I was laughing at the other people that were doing the improv, and I was laughing at myself being a fool. And Kristin, here's where everything changed. This was the game changer for me. I realized that the will to live had to be something that came naturally inside of you, where you could express your talents, and you believed that the best was yet to come. You believed that there was something beyond, because I remember before that time I was thinking, oh, well, I've seen people, I know people, I know love, I know travel, I know what it's like to have dinner. What else is there to expect? So with that said, I started living again. And since that time, I started the Self-Worth Initiative. I have written books, And my little joke with God is I kept on saying, God, please, please, if I could just walk, if I could just cook dinner. Now you have to understand, I never cook dinner. If I could just cook dinner for David, that would be amazing. And now I'm like, God, if I could just have a Broadway show for my, this vision that I have. And if I could just help people remember who they are and know how much they're worth, then that will make up for everything that I've gone through, because I've got a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
That's my.
You sure do. So what would you tell people out there? So I'm imagining that people are listening to this and some of them are really resonating with that, feeling like, having to be wheeled around in a wheelbarrow to these different doctors and acupuncturists and chiropractors and clinicians who are, looking for answers and may or may not be validating them. I'm sure they can also relate to what a relief it must have been to finally have your life partner show up in his full supportive glory and be like, you're my woman, you're my person, I'm here. I may not understand what's going on with you, but I'm going to be there for you. That's incredibly powerful. And I'm so glad you have that. But what are the things that someone who can't quite get to that place of believing that they actually could make it? Like some people are feeling pretty hopeless. Some people are feeling pretty demoralized. What would you tell them? What would you tell your former self at that moment, before you found that on your own?
Brilliant question, Kristin. Brilliant. The first thing that I have to say is the reason that I started in the beginning when I was a child is because my whole life was about building self-esteem. I always thought self-esteem and self-worth were the same. They're not. Self-esteem is all the things you do to accomplish. It's your relationship. It is your job. It is the money that you make. When you have nothing left and everything is stripped away, that's where you've got to look at your self-worth. Now, here's where it gets really difficult. And this is why I'm such a self-worth ambassador. Because when nobody believes you, you're frightened, you have nothing to hang on to. You can't say, well, I'm doing this really incredible thing. Potentially you're in bed, you're frightened. How do you get self-worth? How do you even begin to value yourself when you're looking at society who's looking at you thinking that, why are you even existing? So the first thing that I would say to anybody that's going through something is, I gotcha. Give it to me. Give it to me from the standpoint of, I really care. And part of, I think, the journey is to just establish your own value without anything telling you who you are. It's probably the hardest thing that anybody has to go through. It's like a master's degree in life. However, once you establish your own value, nobody can take it away. And I think that's what the great gift of this whole scenario can be for anybody that's hurting. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, we all want to belong and we all want to be validated and we all want to be heard. It's like so important. You don't want to feel invisible. You want to be seen. I get it. Oh my gosh, I really, really get it. And so the first thing I would say is, what if the best is yet to come? What if you don't have the answers? What if there is something waiting for you? Look at Kristin. Look at Kristin, who's gone through so much, and yet now she is creating the most exquisite healing community for you, so that you'll have a place to thrive and you'll have people who understand. If at any time she stopped what she was doing, the Healing Grove wouldn't be here, but she didn't know it at the time. If I had stopped when I wanted to because I wasn't sleeping, it was so valid, then all the books, all the things that I want to do to make a difference, they wouldn't even be part of this consciousness or this world. So the next thing is, you don't have to know what's going to happen next. You just have to believe that you're worth it.
So that's such an important message. And I'm so glad you walked us through it. And I know there are still people out there who are like, I get it. Like, I know I'm supposed to feel worthy. I'm supposed to believe that. And I'm just not feeling it. Like, what are some active things people could do? Maybe a practice or a tool that they could use to start to cultivate that, even though it feels hopeless and even though they're not even really sure they want to cultivate it. Like, what are some things that they could mindlessly take, steps they could mindlessly move in that would help them maybe start to feel that spark again and that desire to build their own worth?
Kristin, that's such a great question. Now, once again, this is a little different from my standpoint. When I'm working with my clients, everybody is different. The reason that I went back to my childhood is because everybody has this special sauce, the ingredient of who they are. So let's say as a little kid, you were really creative, and you're in bed, and there's almost nothing left in you, but if you used to love to draw, and you used to love to do things that are like that, then for that person, I would say, let's excavate and look for all the creative things that you did and bring it back. I'll give you an example of something that I did, and then something I helped somebody else with. When I was at my very worst, I had a theory, and I wanted to try it out on myself first. And my theory was, take something I love doing and take something I want to give and combine the two. No pressure. So I love photography. So I ended up doing Faces of Love. I started going to hospitals with kids who had cancer, and I take the kids out for the day, and they might have had brain cancer or whatever kind of cancer, and I take the most beautiful pictures of them. And then I give it to their families, and the families would be like, oh my gosh, this is like worth $1 million. I forgot that my child was so gorgeous. And it filled me. It gave me a life force, because the truth was, I wanted to be kind of like a spy, because I felt so misunderstood. I wanted to see, what are families like with kids with cancer? And as a photographer, I was behind the camera taking pictures. So they were gifting me a life force, and I was gifting them, and grace was had by all. So that's an example from me. With the clients that I have, they're, and once again, it's like almost very individual, because each person has a different thing to share. I worked with one of my clients who wanted to be a comedian. She's so funny, but she had gone through a traumatic divorce. Everything was going south on her. We worked together, and she actually won, or she's a finalist for one of the Florida's female comedians. So can you imagine going from rejection of going through a divorce and then being on the stage doing comedy? But it just lit her up. So I guess the biggest thing that I would share right now is, you have to channel the energy somewhere. If the energy is imploding and you're trying to solve things and solve things and solve things, it's going this way. You need to get it out to go this way. It's really, really important.
Beautiful. You know, as I think about a lot of the healers in this grove, many of them talk about their own recoveries from mystery illness, to be quite frank. And a lot of them have used their creative selves as the vehicle for their own healing. And I'm just, as we're talking, I can't think of a one who didn't in some way bring that creativity and began to let it flow through them. I mean, even me, for example, I feel like a lot of what I've been creating in the last several years is truly coming from this impulse to create something that's visually appealing, that's fun to be in, that makes you feel like a child again. You know, my 17-year-old joked with me when he saw the Healing Grove. He was like, Mommy, I think it's hilarious that he calls me Mommy. He's like 65. He's like, Mommy, I think that like he was trying to be really politic about it. He's like, I think it's a little, I don't want to say unprofessional feeling, but like, it feels a little bit like, you know, a fairy house and the fairy tale, and like the Keebler elves might be coming out of that tree. And I was like, yes, exactly. Like that's where I want to be, you know, and I want to hang out there with other people who want to cultivate that sense of play and creativity too. So I really resonate with that. And I thank you for putting like such a fine point on that. Yeah.
Most definitely. I think, and the childhood wonder, if there's two things that I know, and I'll tell you the skills, because I think this is also very important. I think the skills that anybody needs to recover are the following: courage. It's not an attribute, it's a skill. You have to learn it. It's not like you got it. You have to practice. The next skill is imagination and creativity. So like when you created something almost Disney-esque, when I look at it, I'm like, I want to play there. I get excited. And if I'm getting excited, it's just letting people lean into their childhood and wonder, how cool is that? And then the next thing that I think is really important is curiosity. I think that what happens when you aren't feeling good is you lose a lot of the curiosity aspect. But when I started to go through my journey, I realized that no two people see the same rainbow. Did you know that? No two people, depending on where you're standing and how the light refracts, you have your own rainbow. I mean, how cool is that? There's a flower that only comes out once a year. Oh no, actually once in a lifetime. It just one time. Now, who comes up with this? If you were like looking into wonder and seeing what's out there, and it takes you out just even for a moment, you can breathe. It's almost like you can breathe because something in you is like, wow, maybe there's something bigger than me. Maybe there's something I don't understand. And then the last thing, the last C that I think is very, very important, and I work with a lot with the people that I work with, is compassion. And more important than anything, of course, we have to be compassionate to other people. I'm all for that. But we have to be compassionate to ourselves. We beat up on ourselves, especially people who have undiagnosed things that are a mystery. It feels so lonely.
Yeah. And I think it bears saying that, you know, nobody who's beating you up emotionally for not fitting into the mold, right? For not having a clear diagnosis that they can get behind and understand, for not having to sit in contrast with doctors. Nobody wants to sit in contrast with authority, right? Well, most people don't. I sometimes fall into that problem myself, but you know what I mean? Like people want to have things that make sense. And part of what I think is required that feeds into all these things is just the willingness to sit with some uncertainty. And we're not that great at that as humans, you know? We're not that great at not knowing what the next steps are, especially when the stakes feel so high. You know, my wife is lying in bed for 3 years and a shadow of her former vibrant self. Like, WTF, what do I do with that? It's the stakes are high. You know, you were on your deathbed. Really?
I was. You know, people don't understand the 3 for the iron. You know, most people are like, I don't get that. But my doctor
First of all, if you had that overnight, you'd be dead. You had many years to build up to that, which is why your body was able to accommodate it with probably a heart rate that was off the hook. You probably had a heart rate of 110 or 20 all the time, and accommodate by lying in bed because it wasn't placing the demand on you that your body would have, you know, if you'd had that kind of demand of moving around, your body would have needed more blood flow and oxygen, and your body, you know, you didn't have enough iron to carry it. You don't get to an iron of 3 overnight is the point. It's pretty remarkable.
No, I know. It's just, and you know what you just said is so important too, because the book that my husband, when we were traveling and we came to Florida and we were finally going to get a home, the book he was reading was Uncomfortable with Uncertainty. That was the book that kept us going. Uncomfortable with Uncertainty. And it was little stories about how you have to stay with it, because in the uncertainty is peace.
Yeah. Well, and it occurs to me that courage isn't the only muscle that you need to flex to get stronger at it, right? All the things you mentioned, creativity is a muscle. Like we all are innately creative beings, right? But if we're not flexing those muscles, we're not cultivating that creativity. We're not giving it a clear, easy path to flow through us. Cultivating curiosity is what you did when you went to the hospital. What's it like for those marginalized families and those deeply despairing people? And how do I borrow a little bit of their humanity by connecting with what's going on with them? I mean, that's you making a choice to cultivate that. And compassion is the same thing, right? We're all innately courageous, creative, compassionate, and curious beings, but a lot of that gets stamped out. I mean, for God's sakes, you stopped smiling for a decade. Like, you know what I mean?
I know. Nobody can believe it. Nobody can believe it now. It's like, yeah, that really was true.
You've had so many like iterations of yourself. And I think that's another piece of your story that I find so compelling, is that you've literally reinvented yourself multiple times. Do you feel like you're done?
I think that I'm on to my biggest mission yet. When COVID hit, I thought I was happily retired. I was like, I've done everything. But I saw so many people crash and burn. They're going through health issues, health fears. Like I went there. I'm the little, what is it called? The sparrow in the mine? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
The canary. Okay, I like sparrows because they sing. The canary in the mine. That's me. I've been there. I know I can help. I can guide, and through through those dark times. And so I decided, you know what? For the Self-Worth Initiative, we did musicals. We helped thousands of families in New York and all over Florida. But right now, I want to help people know their self-worth. If I can just tell somebody, hang on, look at me, see my vibrancy. I still have pain. I still have pain every day. And so now it's like the opposite. Now I'm smiling, even though my body isn't as strong as it was. And I do have some health issues that are still there. But I know my worth. And if I know my worth, and if I could have come through all this, and I can tell somebody else, you are worth it. You don't know what's going to happen next. And if they can believe me, and just one person says, well, all right, I don't know, but I'm going to hang in there. She said it. I heard it a couple of times in the Healing Grove from all these different people. Then it will all be worthwhile. I'll just share one last thing. When I was going through my worst time, I actually went to my dad and I said, Dad, I'm checking out. I know this is kind of weird, but I gave him my letter and I said, Dad, I'm checking out. I can't take, this is when the tumor, because the tumor was on my backbone. And so the pain was horrific and I was bleeding to death all at once, but I didn't know it. So he said to me, he's not really a spiritual guy, even though I am. And he told me the next day, he said, my mother came to me and said that you're an angel on earth, that you need to hang in there because you're going to help so many people. Now this was, oh my gosh, it must be 30 years, between 25 and 30 years ago. And it was what made me hold on. And I didn't believe it. I was like, you're lying. I don't even know. Everybody hates me. How's this going to work? I'm not vibrant. I have no personality, and then every once in a while I get this little glimmery thing around me that goes, maybe that's why I'm still here to talk to you. Maybe I've been waiting for this moment my entire life. So thank you, Kristin. It means the world to me. It really does.
Thank you so much. That touched my heart. I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so grateful that you made the decision to hang on, because you obviously had so much more to give to the planet and to yourself. So well done. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healing Grove podcast. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to deepen your experience further, consider grabbing a copy of the Healing Grove Playbook. With journal prompts for this podcast and 41 others, it's the perfect place to record your learnings, keep track of the tools you explore, and reflect on your own experience. Finally, it's important to mention that even though I am a doctor, nothing you hear on this podcast, whether from myself or my guests, constitutes medical advice. Any intervention you try should always be discussed with and supervised by a trusted member of your own healing team. Thanks for listening, and see you next time in the Healing Grove.